I've got a staff and I've got a team and they're looking at me. And if I come in and I am moping and grouchy and pissed, they're going to be too. Instead, I want to greet them every day with a sense of optimism, like, hey, I don't care how hard this challenge is that we're dealing with. We're going to figure it out and it's going to be awesome. And if you want to be a member of this elite, high-performing team, then that's the way you carry yourself, and you work that down echelon with your folks too. So in order to participate, I'm pretty candid saying, I only want high performers on my team.
Okay, welcome back, or welcome to the Finding Mastery podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Gervais, by trade and training a high-performance psychologist. And I am thrilled to welcome Vice Admiral John Mustin to the podcast for this week's conversation. What is it like to lead 59,000 people? What if those people are spread out all over the world? Chief of Navy Reserve, or CNR, Vice Admiral John Mustin knows exactly what it's like. And he does it with a singular, laser-guided priority in mind: warfighting readiness. So what exactly does readiness look like? When it comes to performing at the highest level, Vice Admiral Mustin is steadfast in his belief that individual performance is informed by both competence and character. We'll find out how he helps instill these traits in his force and the challenges that come with it. Vice Admiral Mustin has an extraordinary grasp on leadership philosophy, communicating effectively across large organizations, and using his civilian experiences to inform strategy within his military career. And he is generous enough to share his insights with us around both organizational and personal high performance. With that, let's dive into this week's conversation with the very impressive Vice Admiral John Mustin. Admiral, this is an honor, and I do not say that word lightly. And so thank you for being here. Thank you in advance for bringing a generational type of insight and wisdom to this conversation. So I appreciate you.
Well, I can't tell you how thrilled I am to be here. And as I mentioned, I've been a long-time listener. So this is kind of a big moment for me too.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Okay, good. So we're both in it. All right.
Uh-huh.
All right, good. So let's start at the top. In your most succinct way, like, what is the U.S. Navy Reserve, and why is it important for us to understand the operations that you're running?
Great question. So the Navy Reserve is about 60,000 citizen sailors, as we describe them, and we're an augmentation force that makes our Navy more capable and have greater capacity in the event of peace or war. So at its most basic level, we were born prior to the nation's entry into World War I, so in 1915. So we just celebrated our 108th anniversary. And in every significant conflict since then, the Navy Reserve has augmented the active duty force for our nation. In World War II, we had 2 million sailors that were reserve, that served in the Pacific and in the Atlantic. So the nation has come to expect that the Navy Reserve is not only ready to perform, but is qualified, certified, and able to mobilize when ready. So the missions that we're doing around the world, I've got people in every time zone, in every area of responsibility, every combatant command area that are serving right now. I mean, they're around the world representing the interests of our nation. So it's important.
In your organization, the reservist organization is civilian. Are they civilians, or like, how does the bifurcation work between being a sailor versus being a civilian?
Sure. So of my 60,000, 10,000 are active duty sailors whose job is to train and administer the reserve force. The other 50,000 are called selected reserves. And those are the folks that you may know by the old bumper sticker of a weekend a month and 2 weeks a year. Mm-hmm. So we say, okay, that sums to 38 days. And it really, today does not need to be a weekend a month and 2 weeks a year. That's the minimum requirement. You may want to do 2 weeks at one time and then do another 2 weeks and then not come in for a couple of months. As long as it sums to that 38 days, then you get what's called a good year. But the short answer is 10,000. So roughly, 15% or 16% of my folks are there all day, every day. They are indistinguishable from an active duty sailor, but their focus and their job is to administer the reserve force.
That number, 10,000 to the 60,000. Mm-hmm. Okay. Is that thoughtful, or did that happen by accident?
Oh, it's incredibly thoughtful.
Okay, pause the rest
Right.
of the answer because 1 in 5 is where we've been working from. We found some research to be able to impact or create a critical mass across culture. We need at least 1 in 5 to be able to be like the heartbeat of what you're
Right.
trying to create. And then I hear you say something very close to that, like 1 in 6.
Hmm.
And I'm wondering if like I'm not being too ambitious with the 1 in 5, but tell me more about that. And if you agree
Yeah.
with that
Yeah.
idea that you need like 1 in 5 to be able to create the heartbeat or 1 in 6 in your turn.
You bet. And I don't want to make it sound too mathematical. So it's not that we have 1 out of every 6 in small units is
No, right.
active.
Yeah. It's
So
from a broad stroke.
exactly. Like,
Right.
for instance, I've got 115 reserve centers. They're staffed by my active duty reserve sailors. So typically staffs of between 11 and 40, and they are civilian and active duty reserve.
Okay.
And they manage a selected reserve population that could be up to 1,500. So we do track that ratio very carefully. That will never be 1 in 6. That's more like 1 in 30.
Mhm.
But that's what we found to be manageable at the reserve center level. My staff at the Pentagon, 55, all we call them training and administration of reserve. We call them TAR. So all TAR sailors. My reserve forces command down in Norfolk, one of my Echelon 3 commands for folks who know what that means. That's 100% TAR staff as well. And then scattered throughout my operational units. So again, of the 60,000, 30% we call operational units. Those are small boat units. Those are expeditionary medical facilities, cargo handling battalions, Navy SEALs. Those are also populated heavily with TAR sailors because they need to be there every day, and they need to make sure that they're taking care of the training and the certifications, the regiments, the equipment, and things that you just can't do if you're showing up only on the weekend.
Okay. Do you think that 1 in 5 or 1 in 6, from a heartbeat to create change in a culture, do you think that that's close? Does that intuitively feel right to you?
It does intuitively.
Intuitively.
And just from an organizational behavior perspective, it sure does.
Yeah.
The way I look at it, though, is I scrutinize every billet and every sailor across our force as part of a pretty rigorous
What is
and
it? What is a
iterative.
billet? Sorry.
Billet is a specific job.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you scrutinize every
billet,
and
every unit.
okay.
Okay, so a unit is essentially a company, and the billet is the job. But I look at every one of those because part of my job as the chief of the reserve force is to augment or improve, optimize our force design, which is what is our capability and what's our capacity. So what do we do and how much of it can we do? So I've made trades over the last 3 years where I've said there are some things that we are no longer going to do, but I will harvest those billets or units to build up additional capacity in the things that we know we must do. And that's been part of a pretty generational transformation where we've said legacy functions that made a lot of sense in the global war on terror post 9/11, which, by the way, non-maritime. Okay, so we were providing support to joint force requirements in the deserts. That's not why the Navy exists.
Right.
So part of my charter when I
Right.
came in was we're going to modernize the reserve force, and what that really means is review, audit, assess, determine what is the utility of every one of our sailors and what are they doing. And so in many cases, I said, we know that we need more capability in Navy special warfare, our SEAL friends, the SEAL enablers. We need more there. That's a capacity and a capability that is in demand by our fleet commanders. I need more capability in space capability, cyber. Those are areas of growth for us. Expeditionary logistics. This is another one where if we're going to be drawn into conflict in the Indo-Pacific region, in all likelihood, it's going to look a lot like it did in the war in the Pacific in World War II. Picture Guadalcanal, island hopping campaigns. We've got great reserve capacity there. In fact, there are 7 cargo handling battalions in the Navy. 6 of them are reserve force. So I'm saying maybe we need more. That could be something that would be tremendously in demand, and we should probably grow capacity there.
So capacity and capability. This is these 2 words I'm very familiar with from a sport and human development perspective. I'm not sure the community fully embraces those 2. But so capacity and capability, they work together, but they're very different.
Absolutely.
And when I think about capability, I think, what are you capable of doing, or what are we capable of doing? And that for me like points to skill mostly.
Yes.
But what is
Yeah.
it for you as well?
Well, it's skill, but it's also training and qualification.
Okay, right. And I would say those lead up to the ability to be able to express a skill.
Exactly.
And then express a skill on demand under duress is like, that's what I'm most interested in high speed, accurate environments.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. And then capacity means something different. And so how do you think about capacity?
So capacity, and again, the easy way is, okay, capability is what we do. Capacity is how much of it can we do.
That's right.
So we talk about watch teams, essentially if you think of a football game, okay, you got your starting team. Well, if everybody gets hurt and you have to roll in with the second string, okay, that's the second team. The Navy operates around the clock, around the world. And so typically the active duty manpower design accounts for daytime operations. But if we're drawn into conflict like we're seeing in Europe right now, we're going 24/7. So the reserve force comes in and we're watch sections 2 and 3, if you picture an 8-hour workday. So the capacity that we bring is the ability to supplement from daytime operations to 24/7 operations.
How about that? Okay. So it's not like you're waiting around in a lounge, like waiting for somebody. It's like you're like in sweatpants training all the time. That's a terrible idea. But like I
can assure you that's not the visual that I have when I think of our training.
Right. Yeah. So like there's a active readiness for 2 and 3 on a 24-hour clock.
Absolutely.
3 segments. You are responsible for 2 and 3 readiness.
Yes.
So if something strikes at 11 p.m., you're up.
We would be on the watch floor already.
On the watch floor already, because you're already there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Now that's even better. Okay. And you mentioned what did you call it? The Indo-Pacific?
Indo-Pacific. Yeah. That's the area of the world.
It's hot there now.
It is.
Yeah. And so I think we're all watching, and I'm not asking you to say anything out of turn here. If something were to happen in that region, what would the picture look like from a global perspective about responding to that call?
Globally, for all of our services, it would be massive. And then I can get more granular about the Navy. But I can assure you, if something happened in the South China Sea or in the Strait of Taiwan or in the East China Sea or the Philippine Sea, it would be massive on a scale that we haven't seen since World War II. And it would have global economic impacts before we even get into kinetic issues or collateral damage. I mean, there are certainly scenarios where we see, depending on what exactly it is we're talking about, if it's gray zone conflict and to
gray zone.
differentiate what that is. So if we think of conflict as being binary, we're either in peace or war, what we find is that's never really the case.
Have we always been in gray? Since you've been alive, I've been alive?
Mostly with the advent of cyber and social and other information warfare capabilities, which means it's below the threshold of armed conflict, but it's still conflict.
Yeah.
We see intrusion on our networks every day. And so again, that is not necessarily attributable. And even if it is, we're not going to go to war because of that. So we refer to that as gray zone, where you say, again, if peace is white and war is black, kind of we're operating in a gray zone in a lot of domains. Now, we refer to domains as under the sea, on the sea, over the sea, cyber, space. Those are all referred to as domains. So we recognize.
Wait, do that again. That was fun. Under the sea,
on the sea, over the sea.
And you have that full
that's
stack.
The Navy. Oh yeah, absolutely.
You're the full stack.
You bet.
Yeah. And does each vertical in military operations have that full stack, or the Navy uniquely has that full stack?
Each of the services has a component.
A component to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But
the Navy runs the vessels.
Sure. So we on the sea, you could be a surface warfare officer. So we're on the surface of the ocean. Interestingly, the Army has boats,
destroyers,
carriers.
It'd be
cruisers.
Weird if like your family name had a destroyer. Wouldn't that be interesting?
Could
you
amazing.
imagine?
That would be amazing.
That would be amazing if like your family. And what if there was 2?
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be something. What if there was one guy who had 2 named after him? Yeah,
okay, I can't wait to go back to that part of the story. Okay, so there's a full stack. You're under the sea, on the sea,
over the sea,
which is air.
So submarines, ships, airplanes.
Okay,
and then cyber,
right,
and space. So satellites.
And are you managing responsibility, capabilities, and capacity across all of those?
I am.
Whew.
Yeah.
So you can't just like.
But to differentiate when we say manage, so I provide the forces. So I'm a service provider. So I make sure that we have the units, the billets, the people trained and certified, so that the active duty commanders can task them. So I'm not an operational commander,
Right.
But I am a service component that delivers people.
Okay, this is why I wanted to speak to you. At this very intersection about you have a service, your service is primarily people, and scaling leadership, being able to cascade ideas, to create a heartbeat where people see themselves in an important mission and they're an important part in it, or an important purpose, and they see themselves in that. That is challenging. That challenges the best of leaders. And so I don't know if you're working from like a model or you've been figuring it out as you go, and you've got you got 3 or 4 generations of, is it 4 generations?
Actually more than that, but yeah, 4 from the Naval Academy.
4 from the Naval Academy, generational. And maybe just walk us through that. Like it's great-grandfather.
Sure. So my great-grandfather, Henry, was class of 1896. And his son, my grandfather, Lloyd, was class of 1932. And then his son, my father, Henry, was class of 55. And for good measure, his brother, Tom, my uncle, was class of 62. And then I was class of 90. But if you go on my grandmother's side, then there were several others as well. But I won't complicate things.
No, yeah. So there's a bit of a baton passing, whether it's, I wonder how the DNA works here, but like there's a baton passing certainly of young dining room, breakfast table conversations that I would never been exposed to, like that you and your family were getting early on. And so before we go to that part of it though, how do you think about leadership at scale? And I don't want to taint it in any kind of way, and I don't want to even butcher it by saying leadership at scale.
Right.
So like, how do you respond to that?
Well, I think what you're getting at is an important topic, which I've always viewed as the more senior we get, yes, we're still leaders, but the leadership requirements and demands change. As a young officer, you're a leader from the first day you join the Navy, but you may be leading a division, and that may be 15 people. That's certainly different than being the commanding officer of a destroyer with 350 people, or being a strike group commander with 10,000 people, or being the chief of the reserve force, with 60,000. And the Navy is pretty smart about this, and we invest in leadership training. So we've got what we refer to as our continuum of leadership training. So we give you essentially unit level training when you're young, and then you get to be a mid-grade or field officer, you get additional different training. And then you get an executive level training. And then when you become a flag or a general officer, you get different training. I would tell you, when I was a 1-star admiral, the training was different than it was for a 2-star admiral. And then as a 3-star admiral, we're exposed to a really unique series of training opportunities that talk about organizational change and talk about large scale dynamics and basic things about, okay, not only establishing a vision, but how do you communicate it? And what do you do from the ground up versus from the top down? And, are you inspiring and rallying people, or are you holding people to the line? How do you cultivate your personal leadership style? In my view, I've always said it's hard to argue with results. And there have been occasions when I've said, hey, I tried this and it was less effective than this other technique, which worked very well. And so, the Navy in many ways is a large institution, all total, active and reserve, over 400,000 folks. But we are very entrepreneurial as a service.
So let's do that. Let's talk about some frameworks that make sense to you. And then I also want to double click on the idea of like how to help create a vision and then cascade that vision. Because that's a super practical, and I'll tell you how I do it. Sure. Not at the scale, of course, you're doing it. But are there models that you think through that have been meaningful to you when it comes to leadership?
There certainly are. There are some that I would look at as a problem-solving framework. We use something called DMAIC. I don't know if you're familiar with DMAIC. No. Yeah. So
make sure I look that up.
Well, and it's interesting that this is something that we're investing heavily in training all levels of our teams. From the most senior person to the most junior person. And that framework is important to us because, again, as it relates to problem solving, I just don't feel like we've got the time or the bandwidth to flail. We want to be ruthlessly efficient in addressing the root causes of problems in ways that is commonly understood. So in my case, what I tell people is, here's how I want to take a brief. I have some basic expectations before we sit down to talk about an issue. And I want the problem statement to be explicitly stated. Because what I've learned over the years is sometimes I get a 40-page PowerPoint deck that talks about all the reasons that the world is hard, and yet there's nothing actionable in there because they're trying to boil the ocean. Instead of saying, the root cause problem is the following, and there are 10 stakeholders involved. This is what is required to fix it. Here's where I need your help, or I don't need your help, but I want you to know what we're doing. And after agreeing on the problem statement, like a lot of times we don't get past that first slide because I'll say, I don't think you put enough effort in the problem statement.
Yeah.
So,
and that is drilling down to the
root cause,
root cause,
and not treating the surface symptoms, which it's easy for us to leap into activity and say something broke, slap some duct tape and bubble gum on it and declare victory. When in fact, what we really need to do is think about, why did this happen and what was it systemically? In many cases, when we're talking about human beings, there's a degree of variability that we have to accept. But I always look at it as kind of the owner of the system to say, what could I have done differently to either train or enable the people to perform better?
That's your central question.
That's my question. Right? I look in the mirror every day and say, okay, it would be easy for someone to say this sailor did something stupid and we should throw the book at him. My first thought is, what could I have done differently that might have prevented the decision that person made? And again, I agree, or I assume that no one wakes up saying, today I'm going to do dumb things. Right. So,
yeah. So, and I don't think people are the villain in their own story.
No, of course.
Yeah, right.
Of course.
Do you think people are fundamentally good?
I do.
You do?
Yeah.
Not this. So that's refreshing for me to hear, because you and I have both seen people do some of the most
absolutely
egregious, like, I'm even a loss for words thinking about like some of the things that I've experienced and seen and heard secondhand that people are struggling with. In both elite in performing environments as well as something different than that. So how do you come to that idea that people are fundamentally good?
On one hand, I may be naively optimistic.
Are you? You are an optimist.
I am, absolutely.
Yeah, me too as well.
But I wake up and I think to myself, okay, today I get to make some decisions. One is, am I looking for the good in this day, or am I looking to complain about all the things that are difficult in the day? And so the other thing that I realize is I've got a staff and I've got a team and they're looking at me. And if I come in and I am moping and grouchy and pissed, they're going to be too. Instead, I want to greet them every day with a sense of optimism, like, hey, I don't care how hard this challenge is that we're dealing with. We're going to figure it out and it's going to be awesome. And if you want to be a member of this elite, high-performing team, then that's the way you carry yourself, and you work that down echelon with your folks too. So in order to participate, I'm pretty candid saying, I only want high performers on my team. And granted, in the Navy, sometimes we are forced because of timing and inventory issues. You don't always get to pick everybody that you work with. But my expectation is we're starting from an opening salvo where I say, welcome to the team. It's a pleasure to meet you. And I greet everyone on my staff within the first week of their arrival. And I sit down with them and say, okay, you're coming to work in my manpower shop. Thrilled to see you. Your reputation precedes you. I've read your biography. I got a couple of questions about where you live and what are your interests. Just so you know, you're relieving a person who was the best in this job that I've ever seen. And my expectation is you're going to be better than him. And if that doesn't sound good to you, then now's the time to mention it to me, because I can find you another job. But my hope is that you're going to fit in and you're going to pick up that baton and run fast. And then honestly, everyone says, I can't wait to contribute, sir. I mean, I've never had anyone go, you know what? I thought maybe I don't want to be here.
So that's interesting. So so we've got a model that we work from: support, then challenge.
Right.
You're coming right out the gate with a challenge, with a standard. Maybe it is. And then, so how do you think about that idea, support, then challenge?
I like it very much.
You do like it?
Yeah. In fact, I describe this approach when I do meetings with my team, when they're new, when we do kind of an indoctrination period. Mm-hmm. I'll say, here's what you can expect from me. I am going to envision, enable, and encourage you. So
envision, enable, encourage.
Encourage, yeah. So we're going to talk about what we want to achieve.
Hold on. Admiral, because that's something that, I don't like the word enable for me personally, but the envision and encourage bit is so right down the center of how I've operated, almost intuitively. I don't have a model for that.
I mean, I made it up. So,
You did,
so
yeah.
I will give it to you.
No,
I
well,
want you to use this.
Great. Yeah. But it feels, for
Yeah.
me right now, hearing that from you, it's like I feel not validated. That's not the right word, but I feel like I've been doing this part right,
Right.
So I really appreciate that you're doing
Sure.
it that way. So the envision and then the encouragement part, I really get, and I want to hear how you think about enabling.
Sure. So enabling is I'm going to give you the tools you need, the training. And what does that mean? Hey, in some cases, it's the hardware, it's the connectivity. If you're going to be in the field, you need to be able to communicate. I mean, that's a non-trivial task. So the enabling piece
That's
is
enabling.
in order for you to do your job. I don't want you to say I had a million great ideas and I was ready to go, but the system didn't allow me to do what I wanted to do. So that's the enabling part.
Okay. The encouragement can be problematic for me in my own head when it's not authentically sharp as well. Like so encourage is not like pat on the back. Encouragement for me also is, wait, you can go a little further. You can go a little deeper. You can stand your ground a little more clearly or kindly.
Sure.
Whatever. Like,
Sure.
Is there a sharp edge to
There
encouragement?
is. But it's interesting. I mean, I don't think folks who work for me are going to say, "Oh my God, he's a tyrannical ass."
Yeah.
I think most folks would say,
Is that your epithet?
No, it's going to be my tombstone.
Yeah, right.
No, I think they're going to say, I love working with him. I learned from him. It was a great tour. But I will tell you, I heard one of my subordinate commanders talking to his folks saying about me, he's got great ideas and we need to get moving. He's also very impatient. And so the sharp edge of it is, okay, we've agreed on what that vision is. Come back to me. The next discussion with us ought to be either I'm on it and it will be done by Friday or by June or whenever it may be, or I need your help somewhere, but I don't need the daily updates with status. I mean, I trust you. I mean, the enabling piece is you got the tools you need, right? Do you need additional support, top cover, up echelon communication? Where do you need me to roll in on your behalf? If not, then why isn't it done?
There you go.
And driving to closure is another thing that is a personal pet peeve for me. I say, I just don't want to talk about things. I want to get them done and move on to the next
So
thing.
Closure to activity, like to action.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then close the loop again. Is that part of, I mean, I like the OODA loop
Exactly.
idea. And so, but that's a little bit different. And let's describe OODA.
Yeah.
OODA
yeah.
loop for you.
Observe, orient, decide, act.
Yeah. And is that something you use?
We all do.
Is that closing the loop?
Yeah, I just mean if we say this is a policy document that needs to be signed by 20 people and we're targeting June, I'm saying in May, how are we looking?
Right.
And don't come to me on the last day and say I was off by 90 days and it's actually going to be in the fall.
How do you keep all of that organized?
I have a phenomenal staff.
This is where me trying to keep everything intact is like, it's a disaster, and you can hear laughter in the background.
Yes.
of my team. Yeah,
well,
it's a bit of a disaster.
I have to admit, we're very fortunate in the military, and this is something that I do not see similarly in the civilian world. But I've got a lot of folks who are my enablers, and some of them between a chief of staff and an executive assistant and an aide and a flag writer, they're there keeping the tickler list of the things that we talk about. And when we do a meeting with what I call my division directors, essentially department heads, and we go through, we do a sit down meeting. And as we're talking, I'm saying, that's great. How long is that going to take? Okay, you say it's a month. All right, I'm making a tickler to say, check in, at month or day 25. How are you looking on that month deadline that you committed to?
Right.
So,
I see.
And again, some of these things that we're talking about, I deal in strategy and policy. So sometimes it's, in 3 years, we want to see this movement, which is different than saying, update me every week on that. I mean, I don't have the appetite or interest, frankly, unless something is off plan.
Do you have a cadence to your meetings? Like every day
Absolutely.
There's a thing and every week there's a thing? Do you have some sort of cadence?
With my own staff,
right.
I have standing meeting once a week. So we do a Wednesday morning session with the division directors.
And how long is that?
It's usually an hour.
Okay.
And then the offer is, my door is open. they shouldn't feel like they need to wait until Wednesday to talk to me. I mean, I'm kind of talking to them all day, every day, and we're pretty fluent with technology. So whether that's on chat or some other mechanism, I said preference is not to deal in email. That is really not my preferred communication mechanism, because I feel like for decades we as Americans got sloppy and lazy about saying, "Well, I sent an email, my work is done." So two things about email. I say, not my preferred mechanism. You can come by and poke your head into my office anytime, face to face. I'll take, that's a trump card, or call me on the phone. No one ever does, but I offer that. But I said, or I would prefer IM over email. And we've gotten pretty good now. This is relatively new within the Navy, but the Navy Reserve's leading the way here. We've been very encouraged by the behavioral change to use a collaboration suite. So another reason why I've said I don't want any attachments in email. We can post them, we can work them in parallel. We've got tools similar to what you probably use as Google Docs. And I've just said, why get into version control issues with people emailing things? I said, let's just have one version of the truth and we can all access it together. And when I'm done, we have a workflow that says like, okay, when everyone's put their inputs and then I get mine and we're done, we save hundreds of man hours in the way that we're working. So
yeah, good. Yeah, I've noticed the benefit.
Of course,
well.
Yeah. Yes.
And then when you go up to the envision part of the model, how do you help create a vision for people?
Yeah,
like your direct reports, your leaders, your heads of departments.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of layers to the answer. So as I mentioned, I deal in strategy and policy primarily. So the president writes a document called the National Security Strategy. Then the Secretary of Defense writes a National Defense Strategy, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs writes a National Military Strategy. And then the Chief of Naval Operations, who's my boss, writes the service component element of that. We call it the navigation plan. I read all of those, and then I get together with my staffs and say, here are the elements that I'm seeing where the reserves have either equity or potential capability. I think we should drive activity towards delivering against those things, knowing full well that it's nested with the demands of my boss and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the Secretary of Defense and the President. So that's kind of reserve force wide. I mean, it's easy for me to read those documents and then circle the wagons to say, here's what it means to us. That's different though than when you say, how do you keep your people motivated or establish a vision? The vision that I want my staff to be aware of is I want to move fast. Velocity is important to me. When I talk about any problem that's brought to us where the recommendation is I need more money, people, or time, I say we got to think harder about it. Once again, what's the problem statement? And just a couple of tips and tricks that I look at when we're talking about problems in particular. One is, where are we now? Can we baseline our performance against what the standard is? Are we supposed to be at 85%? And if so, where are we? Okay, well, if we're 82%, I see we got a problem. Or, hey, maybe we're at 92%. Can we get to 100? Again, so we're meeting the standard.
Who sets the standard?
Well, the standards are usually in instructions or documents or things where, maybe I set the standard or,
okay.
But it could be, in the same way that, your PSA should be a certain level. There are just some things that we know we need to be able to do for certifications or training.
Okay.
So first question, where are we relative to the standard? Because a lot of times people come in and say, we need to change this. I need more people. I need more money. I want to do something. And I go, okay, well, first let me get a sense of the scale of the problem. Where are we now? The answer is not always, thanks for asking. It's measured very carefully and we know exactly. A lot of times it's, well, of course we know we need to do this. I go, okay, well, show me. And then the second thing is, so what's the recommendation that you're making and how much better will the outcome be based on this recommendation? If we implement fully the change that you recommend, how much better will we be relative to our performance today? And then we say, okay, so you're telling me it's going to be an 8% lift on where we are. What's the cost in money, people, and time to develop the change that you're describing? Ultimately, what I'm getting at is I want them to understand the quantitative rigor to assess whether, is it worth it for us to do this? I get 100 problems every day. And sometimes I say, you're right, this is not perfect. It's number 20 on my top 10 list, though. I just don't have the time to dig into it. If you can affect the change, then more power to you. But the things that I want to sink my teeth into are the things that are going to give us 100% X return, the ROI, like a portfolio manager. I want to move on the most impactful things because the other thing I recognize is if it was easy, it wouldn't come to me. It would have been done already. So I walk in the door every day saying, I welcome the fact that everything that is brought to me is going to be complicated and unsolvable. and then we'll solve them.
Do the people that are bringing you recommendations, do they come to their conclusions by committee, or do they come from small groups of people figuring it out, like 2 or 3 folks, or is it their discernment as an individual?
Generally, well, the answer is all the above. And it has to do with authorities in our world. I mean, if for some of the very complicated problems we've got, it's multi-constituent, multi-stakeholder issues. So in those cases, you really need a working group. And I don't want consensus to be an excuse to not move. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it would be disingenuous to say, well, I'm just going to solve this problem and then have 5 people screaming like, what the heck? What did you just do? I don't agree with it. So if it's something that is within the ownership of the individual, then I would expect the individual to solve it. If it's more complicated, then we'll bring in the appropriate folks.
Okay. And so the consensus can be a problem. It can slow things down. That's why I'm asking about velocity.
Definitely. Yeah.
And at the same time, discernment alone can miss some of the other signals that are really important.
Sure.
Okay. So when you are trying to make the decisions of things that are complicated and hard, what capabilities do you want of your people to be able to present in the right way, which is clear and brief? Yeah. It's down to the root cause with action steps that they believe will help solve this or get it closer. Okay. And I love the reference point about where we are relative to the standard. I want to come back to that in a minute. But what capabilities do you believe are the most important for your people? And then I'm going to complicate it one more level and project out 5 years from now. Because the world, business, and I'm imagining military operations and sport in general are going to be different in 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Generative AI, fill in the blanks.
Of course. Yeah.
So what capabilities are you most interested in right now?
I studied operations research, operations analysis as a master's degree, and I studied systems engineering undergrad. So I've always been kind of a quant guy. So the foundation for decision making for me is typically born in data, and I certainly am a human, and so I have intuition. I try to mitigate the intuition with data. But I've also taken a lot of
that's
data.
An interesting framing. Mitigate.
Well, because it's easy.
Data, yeah.
Because oftentimes, we can all lie with statistics, right? I mean, I can.
Closed-door analysis.
Exactly. I can take any data set and convince you that it should be white. Nope. Same data. No, it should be blue.
Black.
So we want to be balanced, but I like objective decision making where possible. But what I've found too is sometimes we don't have the luxury of all of the data, and if it would be necessary for me to wait 6 more months to make a decision that was not a multi-billion-dollar strategic decision, I say, I don't want to debate it in the boardroom. I'd rather try something now and then actually collect data on how it worked, consider it a pilot test. This is kind of the lean startup approach. And I'm fortunate enough to have people who are smart enough to understand what I mean and what we're trying to do when I say that. For instance, if it's something that we're trying to do with a training mechanism to get a boat crew certified, okay, it was supposed to take 36 months. I go, would it be possible to do it in 18 months? What would be required to make it happen in 18 months? Well, there's certainly an assumption about availability and people and funding and what does that look like? I get all that. Okay, that's fact. How do we assess the risk? If we implemented that, would people quit? Would it be too hard? Is the operational tempo too rigorous? But my hope would be that we're not saying, well, someone told me 2 years ago that we tried it and it didn't work, so we're never going to do it again. So anyway, that's kind of the here and now piece. As it relates to what's going to happen over the next 5 years, there is no question that AI is going to transform the way that we access and act on information. We need to be really careful, all of us, the world needs to be really careful about the veracity of the information. I mean, you know that bots that are scraping the internet are scraping bad news and fake news as well as good news. So you have to be careful about kind of the sources. But in terms of just pure mechanics, I mean, this is obviously on the order of the Industrial Revolution where, we're going to free up a lot of time for people. And for every copywriter or art director who's saying, this is travesty, I'm going to be out of a job, my first thought is, the art directors who learn how to use AI to hone their craft are the ones that are going to be in demand. So why not leverage it? I mean, this is like the invention of the wheel, and saying those who can harness it are going to be the standouts. And that will have applications in business and military and elsewhere. I mean, there's no question we'll see
Okay, so
changes.
it would be fair to say understanding how to interpret data, understanding how to blend intuition with objective data for discernment.
Yeah.
That would
Yeah.
be a skill. There's something about risk taking and acceptance of mistakes to be
Yes.
able to move with velocity and speed in
Yes.
a pilot
Yeah.
test. And there's something about being stimulated by what's coming. So there's some sort of entrepreneurial mindset there. Like, I want to get ahead of it. I like it. I like what I'm seeing. I'm going to
Yeah.
invest my time and energy, even if it's like not spec'd in my job.
Yes.
Right. So does that sound about right?
It absolutely does. And in fact, when I've described the approach that I've taken to affect this transformation, I mean, my tasking was to modernize the reserve force, to transition us from the global war on terror from over 2 decades to prepare for what we refer to now as great power competition.
Great power competition.
Great power. So we're
this
past the point.
This is not state driven.
Well, great powers are states.
Okay.
So peer and near peer states.
Yeah.
Transitioning from Al-Qaeda, ISIS, violent extremism, that's global war on terror. Now we're saying Russia and China, to some degree Iran, North
Peer
Korea.
or near peer?
Both.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah.
Let's say near peer.
Yeah.
One.
Near peer. So
they're not listening, by the way.
But that, yeah. You've got an international audience.
This is fair.
Yeah,
right.
So as we look at the driver, I have said there's a sense of urgency here.
The race is on.
Yeah. In many ways, I see similarities to the United States in 1939 to where we are right now. And I'm not Chicken Little and I'm not trying to scare people, but I'm saying that the readiness of the reserve force is something that I need to solve today, because if we need to break glass because of emergency in, say, 2027, I don't want then to start saying, how are we going to mobilize 50,000 people? Gee, we didn't think of this,
That's
and
right.
Are they ready to go? And do they know what building they're going to go to? Does their ID card work? Do they have access to the desk? I mean, those are things that I want to work on today.
It's wild. Like, we're seeing some of the choke points from poor logistics in the operations that are taking place with Russia and Ukraine right now. Like,
absolutely.
I didn't know this. This is obviously, table stakes for you, but like, logistics make and break.
I mean, Napoleon. So the army fights on its stomach.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, we and every other country are watching Russia's performance and giving them pretty low marks. But we're also preparing for, and we've done this for decades. I mean, we continue to pour effort into how do we maneuver? Like the United States, we're a forward deployed force, and having a forward deployed force is expensive. I mean, Navy, I always say, we are America's away team.
Oh, that's an interesting way to think
I
of
mean,
it.
we've got ships in Yokosuka, Japan, and Sasebo, Japan, and Bahrain, and Rota, Spain, and not only in Hawaii and in the continental United States in our fleet concentration areas, but we are in Singapore, and we're everywhere that we know we would need to be to support our allies and partners and our national interests. Because the tyranny of distance has a time effect that we can't wait a week to get from Hawaii to Japan. We need to be there. And when we talked earlier about what's going on in the South China Sea, it's a long way from San Diego or Hawaii, but it's closer to Korea and to Japan. And so
in some respects, it surprises me that we're considering that war would be anything other than cyber or in space. It surprises me that we're watching war happen on people's stomachs, like, or whatever that phrasing that you mentioned, like
Napoleon.
Napoleon's. Yeah. It surprises me that it hasn't. I don't know. I always thought, like, when I was a kid, that the wars that would be happening later would be like information based, cyber based, something like that you would watch on Star Trek or Star Wars or something. Not that we might see that, but it would trend toward that. Is it trending that direction, or do you think that it's more likely that we'll be in a war with bullets and ships and
I think it will be bullets and ships, but it will certainly be supported by the capability that's resident in space and in cyber. So I think the nation that controls cyberspace has a distinct advantage. and AI factors into that. But having command of how the electrons are flowing really has a tremendous impact on everything from finding, fixing, tracking, targeting. I mean, all of those things now we do with computers. So,
what are some of the most interesting weapons that you've been exposed to, or like, there's a lot of different weapons out there.
There are. I probably don't want to go into it on this podcast. I mean, there's.
Oh my God. I mean, well, that got me even more interested.
I mean, we've got things that go many times the speed of sound. Have you heard of hypersonic weapons? I mean,
yes.
They are mind-bogglingly fast, and so.
And what do they do?
So they're missiles.
That's a missile.
Yeah, it's a missile, but it goes so fast. Like, keep in mind, our missile defense systems are pretty impressive in that even to defend against intercontinental ballistic missiles, what we do to defend is we shoot a missile at the incoming missile.
So like a hatch has to open.
Oh,
things got to get be exact, precise.
Of course, but then I say, to put it into perspective, that's like you shooting a .22 caliber rifle at me and me saying I'm going to shoot another bullet at it. So the technology.
What's easier, that or golf?
Yeah.
People brag about golf being so hard. I mean, come on. You're right. Okay.
Exactly.
Jeez. Yeah. Okay. Do you have a preference for operations in water or air, or like where do you naturally lean, like just personally?
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm a surface warfare officer, so I serve on ships.
Yeah.
And small boats. And so being on the water is kind of my trade. That said, I own 150 airplanes as the Chief of the Navy Reserve. So we do all of the Navy's adversary missions. So we do threat replication for deploying strike group air wings so that we replicate what our adversaries, how they might look. So you've heard of like Top Gun, right? So the folks that play the bad guys are our reserve squadrons. So the good news about that, and the reason I bring it up is...
so they get in the MiGs or whatever, and that type...
Exactly. So I've got F-16s, we've got F-18s, we've got F-5s.
What's the one that we're most like enamored by? Our ships.
Our ships? Well, we just launched what we call a Flight 3 guided missile destroyer. Just took ownership of it this week. So that's a game-changing capability. That's the equivalent of a new cruiser. So it's a destroyer hull, but it's got, and the difference between a cruiser and a destroyer historically has been size. Cruiser is a little bigger than a destroyer. So this is a little bit bigger on the existing frame of the guided missile destroyer, but it's probably the most capable warship in the world. I mean, granted,
that's a cool statement.
I mean, that's different than an aircraft carrier. So a destroyer is about 10,000 tons, an aircraft carrier is 100,000 tons, and an aircraft carrier carries an air wing. And a destroyer carries missiles and guns. So they have different functions.
Got it. Yep.
Complementary, but different. So anyway, when you say like, what's the coolest one? My submarine brothers and sisters would say, well, don't forget about the submarines. They're pretty cool too.
Yeah, right. So, those are pretty good, right? They're pretty quiet down there.
We fly. My friend, I call him the Air Boss, but the commander of the Naval Air Forces. So we've got F-35s, they're pretty spectacular. We've got lots of F-18s, like you saw in Top Gun 2. So
was there an uptick in enlistment or enrollment?
In recruiting?
Yeah.
It was rumored. So there was anecdotal feedback there, and there was similarly with Top Gun 1, the first one. And I think the facts don't bear it out, but it is a great talking point. I'd love to say there was, but I don't think it's true.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
In fact,
how'd they do?
As
a movie, like how'd they do?
Oh, they did great.
They did.
In fact, so one of the advisors for the flight sequences was a Navy Reserve captain aviator. So Ferg, call sign Ferg, nice job, Ferg.
Nice job.
Anyway, so and lots of photos with him, with Tom Cruise. They say like shooting their watch. As they say, they're doing this.
What does that mean? Like
because you're
shooting your
watch as you're simulating what you're going to do with your hands. But
that's fun.
Anyway, but I thought they did great. Now, granted, my expectations for movies are probably different than some of my New York-based friends.
It's hard. It's hard for you to watch that and not pick out all the. I mean,
when I'm saying I'm sitting there with my wife, elbowing, going, okay, well, John Hamm plays my friend in real life.
Oh, that's right.
And and I'm saying, and by the way, he would never say that. And she's going, okay, you and like five other people in the world.
Tom Cruise.
Exactly.
Good. Okay, so from weapons to limitations. So what are some of the limits or limitations that you see that people bump into? And these are barriers, and I'm more interested in the internal barriers that
Mhm.
people run up against that get in the way of them living their best life.
Yeah.
Being able to really fill in or pour into the mission that they're working on. So, what are some of those limitations?
The older I've gotten, the more I've seen the importance for the balance between mental, physical, and spiritual wellness. No question. And what I used to be able to get away with as a younger man was to eat terribly, exercise vigorously, and pull all-nighters and, celebrate with a cup of coffee in the morning for breakfast kind of thing. And, my famous line was, I can sleep when I'm dead. And what I'm finding now, though, is I am not as cognitively sound if I don't get the right amount of sleep. I don't have the energy to perform like I know I need to if I don't exercise. And so as a result, what I'm doing now is incorporating a far more rigorous and healthy approach to diet, to exercise. I mean, I look forward to exercising to the point where we were talking on the break. I get up pretty early. I get up at 3:30 to meet a friend at 4 so we can exercise together. We'll lift and do some cardio between 4 and 5:30, which then allows me to get a little bit of breakfast and then get myself to the office by about 7:30. And so when you say, what are the limitations? I'd say as I've aged, I've seen some differences there. Some of it is just how much energy do you have? The energy management is critical. And then cognitive function is impacted by everything else I just described. And then the spiritual piece, everybody can interpret spirituality differently, but having some time to either meditate or breathe or think or, atone is important, because anything that I find allows your brain to kind of shift gears a little bit from rigorous analytical behavior to thoughtful, quiet thinking. I think that's a great unlock. And so I don't know that I can apply that to 60,000 people necessarily, but I've sure seen it myself as I've aged over time.
I love that. So if I, just to kind of play it back, the most significant limiter that you've experienced in your life is available energy,
Yeah.
internal energy, like that volition, that kind of raw power to solve things, to do things.
Right.
That if you don't take care of that there's just a limitation.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
Another example, peripherally related but still germane, was, I used to do a lot of running, and over the span of 2 years, I broke each of my ankles in almost the same place.
What kind of running?
I know. Yeah. I wish there was a good story. I mean,
right.
I was running along a river, and the tiles shifted, which rolled my ankle. So in one of my ankles, I've got a synthetic ligament now. But after a couple of surgeries, and I remember saying to the doctor as I was coming out of surgery, how long before I can run again? And he said, you should take your time on this, probably take about 8 weeks. And at 8 weeks, I said, day 1 of week 8, I will be running. And it was excruciating. And I said, I'm not ready yet. But as a result, what I found was, it took me about 6 months before I could really run. And I went from 30 miles a week to, 5 or something, which was not satisfying. And at that point, I was doing a lot of cardio and not much else. So since then, I've learned, hey, at my age, I should be doing more strength and weight training too. So anyway, but it was really enlightening to me that I recognized, without being able to run, I don't feel the same. I'm not as energetic. I'm not as excited. It impacted my optimism. I felt like damaged goods almost.
Yeah. And I'm not going to let this slip.
Okay.
With all the reverence I have for you. 3:30 a.m. wake up. That's early.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that might fit your chronotype and the way that you're genetically wired for it to be an early riser. Tell me the amount of sleep you're getting.
Well, so when I started tracking it,
yeah,
it was abysmally bad. It was like between 4 and
How
a half
were you
and
tracking?
5.
Self-report, or you?
Well,
using
at first I
technology?
was had like a Fitbit, and I was tracking that way. So now I don't wear a Fitbit. I just look at my clock and say, all right, I know this is going to be 5 hours. So I'm not looking at the quality of sleep necessarily.
Okay.
Although I had done that for a number of years. I just can't wear that now because of our job. We can't have kind of Bluetooth things on us. So anyway, but I'm looking at least the span of time. I'm trying to get to 7.
You can't have Bluetooth because, is that a cyber threat?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to know about this. Like, so is it like, could I be hacked?
Oh, if there's anything that you know of that's digital,
Easily hacked.
it can be hacked. Yeah.
Easily hacked.
Yeah.
So if I'm wearing a ring that has like,
I mean, I don't know
we could
what
get it-
someone would do
so
with
that would get
data
into the
necessarily.
phone. Right. I mean,
yeah.
I'm not that interested, but they could get into the phone and get into whatever
Yeah,
that
I mean,
the phone holds.
I'm not a hacker, but I would say, like, for my kids, hey, if you've got TikTok on your phone is on my network, and then what is available as things become vectors to other things. So anyway,
Okay, so go back to the sleep for you.
right. So I want to get to 7, which is my goal. I'm usually getting about 6 or 5.5, but I know that's bad. So before you chastise me, I will say I know this.
Before shame is now a new
because
weapon
I've
in our
made
arsenal.
huge strides with nutrition and exercise. So the sleep is the one where I'm saying I've identified it as the laggard in this 3-legged stool that I want to get better on.
Are you using physical training for physical health and or mental health, or which one would you're saying yes to both?
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And which one would you say is more interesting to you? The mental, psychological benefits or the physical?
Mental first, but I have to admit, I mean, when I couldn't run, I gained weight. And I thought to myself, I don't like being heavy or out of shape.
Yeah.
But I love my workouts in the morning because that's when I can have some uninterrupted time, and that's just
it's cool. Like I don't
cognitive.
I don't want to do what Descartes did and try to pull the mind and body apart.
Right.
Like I'm not trying to do that, but I'm just trying to get a sense of like, is it more for the mental or physical? And of course it's both. Okay,
both. But I would tell you, the physical I value, but the mental I couldn't live without.
And when it comes to nutrition, it sounds like you're learned in all of these forms of well-being and taking care of yourself for longevity, for high performance, for lifespan, for high performance. Are you doing intermittent fasting? Are you not interested? You're not interested in that?
I dabbled in it, and it didn't do anything for me.
And then, okay, so you've upgraded on nutrition, you've upgraded on movement, and you have not quite upgraded to the standard, let's say, the self-imposed standard of, would we call it 8 hours? No.
I'd love to.
That's
at some point.
I'm really good at like 7.45 is kind of where I'm trending right now, where I'm getting that right ratio between deep and REM. And my game is not necessarily carving out. I am disciplined and competing my ass off to get somewhere between 8 and 7 hours every night. Like I'm competing my ass off.
Yeah.
And my family is to do that. So it's a full-time job to try to figure this thing out. But I know if I don't do that and I don't play some of the right notes in the day, my deep sleep is like so suspect.
Yeah.
And so I've got to play the right notes to get that right symphony at night. But so is your first priority to try to go from 6 to 6.5?
Yes. In fact, I was even looking forward to this conversation so I could ask you.
Yeah, let's go.
Because if I had to give up something, is it more valuable to sleep the extra 2 hours or to get the workout in?
Yeah, I don't know how to pull them apart either. I think that if we did like we're on a strike mission and we've got a 5-day strike mission and it's on, I can go without sleep.
Right. Short duration. Yeah.
Right. In a short duration, I'm okay, but I'm compromised. I am compromised towards the end of that.
Definitely.
But I need to come in fit.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I've got it. My system has to be tuned well for me to drain it in that type of like compromised sleep state for a 5-week or 5-day period.
Right.
And when we go away, now let's extend it out to a handful of weeks, and then I'll extend it out for like a lifetime. Okay. So if we're going to when we do a high performance camp at the Olympics or pro camp, and like it's on for 3 weeks and we're in a different part of the world and we're eating food that's not normally our food, and maybe we're having to ship some of it in, or we've got a chef on board that's helping us dial in our nutrition, or we're piecemealing it if we're on a budget, piecemealing it to our best abilities. So you've got sleep, physical movement, you've got nutrition, and then you've got psychological fitness, if you will. Okay, so let's think about those 4. We'll put spiritual as an asterisk right now. Mm. It's actually more of it's an underpinning of the whole thing, is spiritual. Okay, right. But let's just talk about those 4 dials for a minute. Is that I think we need to get 2 out of 4 right, just to be included.
Right.
3 out of 4, right, to be in striking distance of high performance. 4 out of 4, right, to be playful with your craft.
Awesome.
Okay, so 2 is a baseline, 3 is what we're looking for. And you can play with it. Like, it doesn't necessarily matter. Okay. And if we get 4 out of 4, we're winning, like, for sure. All that being said, if you were to press me now and say, which one is most significant for you? I go, okay, I got to do the complicated thing that they're all connected. And then I say, sleep. Sleep is
Really?
ground zero.
Really?
Yep. And then I say, listen, if I'm sleeping right and I'm not fueling it properly, why would I do the movement on top of it? Because movement is a drain. So I'm sleeping right to fill up my bucket. And then fitness is like I'm draining the bucket. And if I'm not feeding it properly, like now I'm in a compromised state.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, all that being said is that when you get your thinking dialed in, and I don't mean like intelligence, I mean the ability to be optimistic in a face of challenge, the ability to be calm and not burn through resources unnecessarily, the ability to be grounded and be where your feet are in any environment. That is so less expensive when you operate from that type of position inside of yourself, that now we're winning at another level because I don't maybe need as much sleep. Okay, so the sleep studies keep coming back 7 to 8 hours of sleep on average for the majority of people. And I think that would also assume that the majority of people are not getting psychological skills training. So they're expensive to operate because they're anxious, they're nervous, they're frustrated, they're fatigued. That's an expensive operating system. I think we could change that model. And I know that I'm dealing with a millions of years old operating system, our brain, but I do think we could upgrade it in a way if the data pool in, let's call it 10 years or 5 years from now, of those people had a real investment in psychological skills, a small investment in nutrition. I don't think we need 8 hours of sleep on average. I think we can get, and I know I'm being, I can hear all of my research friends right now going, are you kidding me right now? You're not going to change the brain in that kind of short amount of time. But the subject pool was deft in, like, it was wanting when it comes to psychological skills operations, which is an efficient way to go through the world.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. And that is perfect context. I've wrestled with this one often, saying, okay, I'm struggling to find the time because I don't want to go to bed at 8 o'clock at night. You know, generally by the time I get home from work, that gives me enough time to have dinner and then work a little more before I go to bed.
So this is a passion problem for you? Like, you love what you're doing? Or is this like you can't quite turn it down? Well, I don't see you as being disorganized. I don't see you as being undisciplined.
I'm pretty organized.
Yeah, right. Pretty disciplined, I think.
So it's interesting that in my case, I'm referred to as a geographic bachelor. Have you ever heard this term before?
No.
Okay. So my family's in New York City.
Okay.
But I'm down in DC working at the Pentagon. So I try on weekends when I'm not traveling for work, I'll go home, and that's when I get to spend time with my wife and kids. You know, we FaceTime every night. But as a result of being down in DC by myself, it just fuels my being a total workaholic.
Oh my God, I've never heard this. I completely relate to this.
Oh yeah.
Like, so when I'm away, what else am I doing?
Right on.
And so, like, I kind of like it.
I am amazingly effective. I mean, I said at one point to my staff, I was relatively new in the job, and I'll always take work home. I mean, the other thing that I recognize is if I come in really early, they'll all come in earlier. And if I stay really late, they'll all stay. So even when I said, hey guys, I'm just going to stay here and do some reading, you all go home.
No one wants to leave.
They won't.
Boss is here.
So I try to leave at a decent hour, between like 5 and 6, I would say.
And then you send emails at 11 p.m.
But I always say, tomorrow, please make sure you address this. I'm not trying to get people to work around the clock.
Okay.
And I will tell them, just because I'm a workaholic doesn't mean that I'm encouraging that behavior in you.
Do you want this pattern for, if your child is passionate about something, would you want this behavior, this pattern of behavior?
If it made them happy, absolutely.
Are you happy?
I am.
You are happy.
Are you living the good life? When I wake up every day, I couldn't be more thrilled.
Is that the good life for you?
It is. I mean, I can't believe I'm getting a paycheck to do this.
Yeah,
I mean, honestly, it's,
really?
I mean, I am so humbled and honored to do this job. I mean, it really is amazing to me. And I think I want to earn it.
Are you
I wanna
saying
earn
that
it every
because
day.
you're supposed to, or you really feel it? I feel it actually, but I just want to make sure I'm not
Oh my
like,
God,
you're not
no.
selling me something here.
No. I
No,
mean,
yeah.
honestly, in fact, I love what I do. My wife is the hero in this story, though, because when I was nominated to take this job, I said, honey, you're not going to believe this. I just got a call from the chief of naval operations, and you're never going to guess what he said. He asked me if I wanted to take this job. And she goes, I think you're the only person who didn't know this call was coming.
Yeah, that's so good.
No, but anyway,
Yeah.
I said, well, we should talk about this because it's a 4-year job and it means that we're moving to DC. And she says, well, the kids are pretty happy in their school here and my job is in Manhattan. So, you can do this.
Let me know what your hotel room or
exactly.
your
I mean,
apartment's
I
gonna
have
look like. Yeah.
wonderful quarters
Oh,
that
you do?
are
Yeah.
that are part of the job. But anyway, I always say she let me do this because this puts tremendous burden on her. I used to walk the kids to school. I would take them to sports. I would participate in all the PTA meetings, none of which I do now.
Can we talk about that partnership for a minute?
Absolutely.
Are you okay to talk about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, family is like, I didn't have this awareness maybe even like 7 years ago. I'll tell you why I'm marking that note or that year. But what people would ask me my whole career, what are the most common traits of the best in the world? And scientifically, I would say we don't know, right? And now, like when I feel like maybe I'm an old person at the table, but I push my chair back and I can see the playing field easier. Partnerships are a huge part of it. And the support that they have from that environment, and sometimes those environments are chaotic and sometimes they're loving and kind and they come in all different flavors, but there's something about that partnership at home outside of the operating environment that is foundational.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
so like what is every relationship I've ever encountered has different flares and tones to it. Like what is yours like with your wife?
Well, so we celebrate our 30th anniversary in 3 weeks. So we've been doing this for a while. We have 3 kids.
Very cool.
Oldest is 13. We have twins that are 11. So if you do that math, we obviously waited for a long time.
We have
kids.
the same path.
Yeah.
We have the same. We did 35 years.
So my wife's name is Kim. Kim has said to our friends, the most irresponsible thing we've ever done is have twins at 44. But it keeps us young. There's no question. But anyway, so when you say, what does it look like? I mean, she is my best friend. She is clearly someone who is my consigliere and confidant. I don't go to her and say, how do you think I should respond to what Russia just did? But I do certainly talk about,
Yeah.
We live and breathe in online calendars and, I'm traveling 20 days a month and I'm trying to get to meet up with her and the kids wherever they may be, whether it's for soccer tournaments or basketball tournaments often. So, we're both busy, but I look forward to our, 10-minute FaceTime every day. That is both a source of rejuvenation and encouragement. But, I keep coming back to, if she said this is too hard, I would stop doing this immediately.
How do you support her? Like, what are the ways? Because I don't know what her profession is, and she might be world's best in whatever she's doing.
Wealth management. Yeah.
Is she? Yeah. Okay. She is in wealth management.
She is,
which is
world's best.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
So how do you support her in that?
I mean, right now I'm an absentee husband and father. So
failing.
Yeah. I mean,
failing.
Look, and there's guilt there.
I see it and I feel it. So I'm in my own life.
I would say the way that I support her is when I retire from this job, I will make it so worth her while. Oh yeah.
I love hearing this because, so just the other night we're at dinner with a couple friends and we're talking about our like next phases or whatever. Right. And my son is 14 heading into high school. So we've got 4 years until like he's got plans for college. And so we got 4 years together as a unit. And somebody asked like, so what's next? And I go, I flat out want to make sure that my wife decides like the next phase. And I would bet that she wants to live in New York City, in Manhattan. Yeah. How about it? Right. And that's where your wife is. Right. And or where she's working.
Yeah.
And so I think in the future, that's where I'm operating from, which is going to be really hard for me. I want to live by an ocean, on a mountain, or a running river. And she's like, I want the concrete. I want big city. I want that energy. So now's my turn.
By the time you move,
Yeah.
I will retire from this job, and we're in Tribeca. And
Well, that's where she wants to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Keep me on the speed dial.
Yeah, good. Okay, good.
I'll show you where I broke each of my ankles running along the Hudson River.
Oh my God.
I know.
Yeah, that's so good. All right, good. So, all right. So let's take a one extension. Or actually, let's finish this up. Like, what would you hope young people listening that are in their marriage right now, or maybe they're not even young, that you would say, listen, I've learned about being a good partner. I hope that you will do A, B, and C to be a great partner. Are there any specific things that you're doing to be a great partner?
I mean, absolutely. One is choose your battles. I mean, Kim and I determined early on.
It's funny coming from you.
It
really is funny.
But we said there are some things that she's going to own, and I trust her. And there are some things that I'm going to own, and she's going to trust me. And the idea there is I don't need her telling me how to install the cable or get the network working. And I'm not going to give her critiques on the laundry, And so she says, if it's mechanical or electrical or trash, it's you. If it's nesting, home design, decor, or food, it's her. So, dividing and conquering is something that we agreed to. If she were telling you the story, she would say that it was born from an occasion when she was working very hard and I was in grad school, and she would come home after a hard day's work, and I would have been back from an early morning workout with a couple of SEAL buddies, a couple hours of class, 18 holes of golf, 4 people at our house drinking a bunch of beer, and she'd come in saying, I'm exhausted. And we go, okay, well, what's for dinner? And she's like, all right.
Yeah,
we got to have a talk here. Yeah.
That's a battle.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Right.
So anyway, back to talking to young couples, I would say first, figure out what you both love, kind of deconflict them. Each of you should own something. And maybe there are things you like doing together. If you like to cook together at the end of the day, that's great. It could be romantic, but still figure out what you want to be responsible for so that you can lighten the load for the other person. Check in, men are from Mars and women are from Venus. I've learned not to leap to solutions if and when I'm hearing of something that is either annoying or conflicting her. So, being a good listener is great for men. And then at the end of the day, I would say we always viewed it as we're a team. Even before we got married, I remember saying to her, I feel so much better about myself when I'm with you.
Okay, team. You build teams, right? And you're building teams in with constraints and with resources. Like uniquely, everybody has constraints and resources. And I spend a lot of time thinking about teams as well. And I'm just in this place, like, how like early on in some ideation or maybe in your career, you're like, I get it. And then you get into that messy middle, you're like, I don't get it. And then it's supposed to get simple again. And I feel like, I don't know where exactly I am, but I'm tired of talking about teams right now. And and because I'm much more interested in talking about teammating, being a teammate. And
Perfect.
Like, I'm far more interested in that than this concept of what a great team is. Like, I want to know about how can people be great teammates? How can I be a great teammate? And how can they be great teammates? And now we have a team. It's like,
can I throw some raw meat your way? Because this is the softball down the middle for you. So my 13-year-old is very athletic, and she starts high school also. So she'll be in 9th grade next year, but has always excelled in soccer and basketball. And one of her coaches said, if she wants to be a D1 player, she'll be a D1 player. The conversations I've had with her, though, and I mean, this is right up your alley, I'm eager to hear this feedback, was I've said, her name is Morgan. I hope I'm not embarrassing her here, but
what's up, Morgan?
Yeah, I know. But I've said, Morgan, you're a gifted athlete. The difference between great athletes and others is there are many gifted athletes, but gifted athletes who train hard and commit to the sport are the ones that you hear about. And the reason I say that is because I question sometimes her commitment. She's always gotten away with it. She's always been the best one on the team. And yet I'm saying you're getting to the age now where you're going to get left in the dust with people who are going to work harder than you. And so one other comment, again, and this is all where I'm dying to hear your feedback, was you're also at the point where your individual contribution is less valuable than your ability to make the team better. So if you had 38 points, that's great, but you lost. I'd rather you score 20 and win. So trying to teach her again how to be a leader on the course or on the court and off the court, and to say your outcome driver, not your metric of success as points or time minutes played. The outcome is, did you win or not? And that's the team contribution. So anyway, back to you.
Julie Foudy, 3-time Olympic medalist in women's soccer. She says, on the world stage, everybody is working hard.
Right.
That's a prerequisite. But you're measured on how well you make others better when you're part of the system versus not part of the system.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, the U.S. women's Olympic volleyball team, I was part of the team that went to Rio. And we took a member, Courtney Thompson, who on paper technically maybe wasn't going to make it. Okay, her technical skill on paper, she was not going to be selected to make one of the 12 that we took. However, she made, and I'm going to butcher the exact number, she made everybody else when she was around 2 to 3% better.
Yeah. It's like points against replacement player, right?
That's exactly it. Yeah. So I mean, it's a massive, like, I'm so much more interested in how can I be a great teammate? I want to be part of a team. I want to help other people have a great team. But the substrate of that is being a teammate. Mm-hmm. And if you're anxious, fatigued, frustrated, overwhelmed, you're going to try to take care of yourself. You can't give anything. What you're giving is that, as we mentioned earlier. So I'm so much more interested in like creating the psychological skills for people to be buoyant enough. They've got their life vest on so they can reach out and grab and help and support and challenge in the right way to meet that person in just the right way that they need it. So like what insights do you have about people being great teammates? Are there any practices that you help, go through?
I mean, it's similar to your experiences and what you just described. I mean, I've always subscribed to the approach of, I'm a Red Sox fan, so I always thought, look, the Yankees will buy all-stars in every position.
Do you like being a Red Sox fan?
I do.
You do? You do?
And Patriots, yes, and Celtics.
Oh my God, Go Seahawks.
Anyway,
Go Dodgers. Yeah, so
Pete Carroll was the Patriots. Come on.
He was. My grandfather, like I can see him. He served in the military as well, and he had he was just a Red Sox hats everywhere he went. Yeah. So we've got the kinship there.
Well, it's funny. Like our kids in our entryway, which I hope you see soon, we've got a photo of our kids just decked head to toe in Sox gear. And so our friends walk in from Manhattan and go, what do you want your kids to get beaten up?
Yeah, what are we doing? No, that's good. Okay.
But anyway, but back to the philosophy, the idea was, hey, do you want the 11 best players or do you want the best 11 players? And so, I mean, that's what you're getting at. And that's what drives me too, is I always say, if I'm evaluating the productivity or the outcome, not output. I mean, I view output as activity metrics. I'm more about outcomes. Like, what difference does it make? And so I just evaluate this. I mean, there's not a framework for it, but I'm watching to see who's the all-star diva whose chemistry is terrible that degrades the performance of the team, as opposed to the person, as you mentioned. I feel like I can train anybody with the skills to be successful on a staff, but the chemistry check is the critical enabler. Like, that's what I'm looking for.
How do you hire for that? Or how do you select
I'll tell you,
that?
I mean, I'm a staff member that I just finished interviews with, and I hired the person based on the quality of the interview. And our interviews are probably a little different than some of your interviews, but I've hired a lot of folks in my civilian job too. But, I always say, I call it the chemistry check. I'm looking for enthusiasm, optimism. Do they look you in the eye? Do they speak with clarity? Do they have a sense of purpose? Not, hey, check out my resume. I did everything you're asking. And
of course I can do whatever it is. Like, I'm a winner.
Yeah. I mean, my and the other thing that I do.
Did they show up like that sometimes? Like that type of arrogant?
But yeah, and the other thing that I will always do is, in my front office staff, I'll have each of them weigh in on this, because people come in and they're waiting, and then I'll say, hey, did you talk to them? And what'd they say? And if they're either, too busy looking down at their phone, or they're not engaging with the people, that's a message. The ones who say, I'm really thrilled to be here. Hey, by the way, what should I know about the boss? Anything that he's going to ask me that I should know about? That's a degree of interest that is an indicator for me too. So lots of tools, none of which are unique, but it's the whole person multiple there.
So the insights that you've learned from military, both on leadership, building teams via teammating, and that how has that served you in your civilian life? Because you've built some companies. And
Absolutely, yeah.
You've got an entrepreneurial background.
Of course, yeah.
And so how do some of those skills translate over, and also speak to like the reservist life a little bit?
Oh yeah, thanks for teeing that one up. So first, the military training was definitely applicable to leadership roles. I mean, I've been a C-suite executive in many occasions, CEO. I own a company that I founded. So the idea of establishing a vision, creating the enabling mechanisms to allow folks to perform, setting the expectations for performance. I mean, those are all standard kind of military approaches that are directly applicable in a civilian sector too. Doesn't matter if you're wearing a uniform or a suit. I would say going in the other direction has been more enlightening, because most of my peers, particularly as a vice admiral, are not reserve officers. In fact, there's only one 3-star reserve officer. That's me. So the rest are career naval officers. My peers have all been in the Navy for 34 to 38 years, and that's what they do. So I'm not throwing shade on them, but they've never had to hire 24-year-olds that are choosing between you and Amazon and Google. They've not kept up with the pace of technology and some of the things that I walked in the door saying, why aren't we doing this? The rest of the world operates this way, and yet we're etching stuff on stone tablets and flying things with carrier pigeons. It's 2023. We need to get with the program. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I had been brought up using the tools that are available. So in some ways, I've been an effective change agent via tasking. I mean, I had this conversation with my boss, the Chief of Naval Operations, saying, I'd like the opportunity to demonstrate this transformation. And you can view the Navy Reserves as a black box. This will be the pilot test. And if I'm confident that it's working, I'll enroll you in it. You can assess it. And then we can determine, is it worthy of rolling out at scale to the rest of the Navy? So,
that's cool.
Yeah.
So that's
honestly,
how you think about.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, that's interesting.
And we are on the leading edge of technology implementation. I mean, we're doing things now with remote access and what we call virtual desktop mechanisms and distributed people, because back to your question about the reserve force, I've got people in every state and territory. We are the prototypical distributed force. So for me to allow my people to be productive without having to fly them to a fleet concentration area. If you live in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, I don't want to have to fly you to San Diego to do work. I want to give you the tools or the access so you can access the networks and the files and the training and the online learning management systems and things so you can be productive where you are, which saves time and money in transit. I'm not suggesting there's not value in face-to-face interaction,
right?
But there are occasions where it is advantageous for us to leverage the technology so that we can keep people where they are and still be productive.
If you were running a 60,000 person org, not in the military, but in like an enterprise business, how would you approach the hybrid workforce?
Exactly as you described. It would be a hybrid workforce.
You would do hybrid.
Yeah, I would say.
So would you have days where you wanted everybody in, or like how would you do?
How I would talk to my COO and say, you're going to be tracking it. So I don't want to make a mandate that we can't enforce. So what do you recommend? And then let's talk about what we want to see. I maintain that my people are evaluated on their outcomes and productivity, not necessarily where they do that. Part of that was born from my time at Wasabi, because I dealt with so many creative folks who said, I came up with this idea in the shower, or it was 12 o'clock at night. I said, so certainly there's benefit in being around the water cooler together. But good ideas there's no monopoly of them in the office, So anyway, and the other thing that I would offer on that front too is I don't think that you can develop culture via Zoom or Teams or online.
I haven't figured it out.
That's hard.
Yeah, yeah. As much as we are intentional about relationships,
exactly,
both at Finding Mastery and anywhere we go, we are helping others, and we are ourselves a relationship-based organization that is developmentally minded. And we think people want to be in those environments, and we have high standards, and we're as sloppy as it gets because we're trying to innovate. So our processes are not clean; they're changing all the time, and so that's one of our great tensions.
Try it,
we're trying to figure things out. But that being said, it's like, if I could wave a wand, I would want everybody kind of like geographically right around my house, and we all live like within
like
3-5 miles. I know we're going back to the 70s, like it feels that way. Well, no, but like we're all kind of community minded. We're in the same place. We love that environment. We walk to work in a way that feels really good, and then we've got this great culture inside where it's spacious and da. that's not how it's working now.
No. And I'm not naive. I mean, I understand some people, if you said we're doing this entirely remotely, some people will take advantage of it. I'm not one of them. My approach
mine
in
is
general.
not like they'll, I guess I actually do think sometimes about like, I don't expect people to grind the way I grind. I don't think it's necessarily healthy. And I don't want to impose that on others, but I do I want to be around people that are really passionate about the thing
Right.
together. And if that's the case, we have to watch another clock, which is that we have to make sure that they're punching out, quote unquote,
Right.
not punching in.
No.
So
Exactly. Exactly.
That is a little bit of a concern from the hybrid, but like, I don't know how to be sophisticated enough to measure output.
I mean, I look at it from a cultural perspective as, okay, let's start on a basis of trust.
That's
I
the right
trust every one of
foundation.
you,
Yeah.
right? The way I say
Wait,
is,
hold on. Do you give trust or earn trust?
I start from a basis of, I assume that everyone is trustworthy.
Assume best intent.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Positive intent. And then I say though, in fact, when everyone checks in to my staff, I give them a little sheet. It's basically what to know about working with John.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
And one of the things I say is, we all start from a basis of trust. If you lose it, it will be very hard to get back. So my point is, I will give you the benefit of the doubt, but if you take advantage of that or you lose my trust, you probably need to go somewhere else.
So you give trust, and then when trust is broken, the water table goes to negative, or does it go to like so low that it's?
It depends on the nature
behavior
of the break. Okay. But the point being, we start from a foundation of we're all trustworthy, we're all working together, we assume positive intent. But as it relates to the telework thing, the reason I bring that up is I say, look, I trust you all. There are going to be times when your child has a bloody nose at school or needs to go to the doctor, or you need to meet the cable guy, or your car breaks down. Go take care of that. I'm not worried about you being productive, and I'm not worried about you being gone. You know the work that you're responsible for and you're accountable for. And as long as you can do it, I don't care where you do it.
It's like you treat them like adults.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, okay. On the trust thing for one more bit, I think we all have this water table of trust, and it's based on our genetic predisposition. It's based on how we're raised. It's based on the neighborhood we grew up in, the geographic location. And I think we have this water table of trust that we come into relationships with. And we've got this idea, and this goes back all the way to Aristotle, like long time ago. There's 3 legs to trust: ability, benevolence, and authenticity. So if you can walk the walk and talk the walk, like, I should probably trust you. Like you can get it done. Are you in it for me as well as you are for you? The benevolence. Are we in this together, or are you trying to take all the chips off the table?
Yeah.
Is this just for your gain, or am I involved in your success as well? That's benevolence. And authenticity, are you going to show up consistently across conditions, being your very best? You can wobble on any of these, but if there's enough consistency across those 3, like I think trust has to be earned. So it's interesting that you want to give it. I think I'm more afraid of being burned than maybe you are. And that probably has to speak to my childhood. And so, and I want to earn other people. I'm not saying that I shouldn't earn. You should give it to me, but you got to earn it. I'm not saying it that way.
No,
like,
I understand.
Let's get in the mud together.
Yeah.
And let's see if those 3 hang together, even when it's messy.
Yeah. It's interesting because one thing that we didn't talk about with my approach and this nature of the transformation we're taking is really comfort with risk or risk tolerance. And I've, as an entrepreneur, have been very comfortable with the fact that, hey, we're going to try some things. They're not all going to work perfectly. And so even as it relates to the nature of trust, I will say, I will start. It is probably born with confidence that even if it goes south, I can solve it, or I'm okay with it, And
so I have that actually. I have a high level of self-trust.
Right.
Like if it goes sideways, I have a deep roots that I'll sort that out too.
Yeah.
So that way, like, I feel like you can bet on me. I'm going to bet on me and I don't say this arrogantly, like, I feel like there's a privilege and an honor to be able to be in service in that way for people I care about.
Right.
And so you can bet on me because I got these deep roots. We'll keep going, like relentlessly, uncommonly, like we'll keep. So you have a high self-trust. So how does that relate to your teammates?
I think the sense is that it allows me to transfer that risk. Well, the way I describe it to them is I'm comfortable delegating to you and I will accept the risk. I want you to
that's
feel
cool.
comfortable
That's
trying
cool.
it.
Yeah.
And I'll provide the air cover.
Oh, I like
if this
that.
doesn't work, I'm the one who's going to say, "Hey boss, we tried it, didn't work." But
That
I
feels
don't
cool.
I don't want you all to artificially filter things out that I might say, "Great idea, try it." So by saying, "Look, I'll transfer the risk to me. You try it, I'll accept the risk."
That's cool. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you think about building teams, you're giving trust. I want to say that, and you're
Right.
taking the responsibility for the risk.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's
I mean, especially as a leader, I would say, the risk is resident with me. We always say, if it works beautifully, the credit goes to them.
yeah. This is like 101.
Exactly.
If a microphone's ever in front of you,
Yeah.
and there's ever a moment, like
Exactly. And we fail miserably. It was my fault. I
Yeah,
didn't
right,
resource
yeah.
them properly or train them properly. I should have known better, But it's true. I mean, that's how you get teams to trust you too, is to say your failure you're never going to be critiqued for trying.
what is the hardest thing to be a leader? What is the hardest thing for you in your position as a leader?
It's probably the lack of downtime. I just feel like we're on all the time. Now,
Yeah.
some of that is borne by my own doing. I mean, I've said to my staff, this is a finite term for me. It's a 4-year job. And I said, I can stand on my head for 4 years. And I don't want to leave any stone unturned. I want to say yes to everything. I want to do everything. I want to be everywhere. Because my force, as I mentioned, is all over the world. I want to go thank them for what they're doing where they are. And so the hard part, though, is, look, there are days when at hour 20, I'm exhausted and tired. And it's like, oh, I got this phone call. I forgot. I got to congratulate this person for being selected for promotion or something. And I want to do that because those kinds of things are really energizing and fun. Like the one-to-one mentoring piece, I sprinkle throughout the day.
Mhm.
But it literally is someone every day, either just a short email or a phone call or something, which is atypical, I think, for people of my
That's
rank.
a practice for you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so slight transition,
Mhm.
keeping with the reservist, and then I want to go to your family.
Sure.
It's a full circle here. I have I had a moment. This was maybe about a year ago. Somebody I really trust in business that's been helping me out a bunch. He's inside of Finding Mastery, and he says, "I got someone I want you to meet." And I trust his judgment in so many ways. And I said, "Okay, great," and I'm excited. And he says, he's going to be ideal for everything we're trying to solve together. I said, "Great." He says, "But there's a little thing that I want you just to know about. He can't be with you for about 40 days a year." I go, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, like he's great, but about a month plus, he can't be with you." I said, "Well, hold on, we're losing 1/12 of the time
Right.
together. Like, well, does that come off the salary? Like, how does this work?" He
Right.
goes, "No, he's a high performer. You'll see." I go, "Okay." So I had the meeting. I was like, "Oh,
Is
There-
he in this
there's-
room right now?
he's actually in the room." Yeah. And so, so I met him and I was like, yeah, there's something different about what he brings to the dance than somebody that is not a reservist. And I wonder if you could, without talking about him like he's
Mhm.
in the room,
Right.
make it more
Yeah,
awkward
no,
for him as he's heating up and blushing, wondering
Right.
what is going to happen next. So he's all in. It was, I
Yeah.
think, one of the great decisions we've made for our company to hit the ground running and to kind of take us into a direction that I didn't even know was quite available so soon, meaning that he
Great.
works with speed and accuracy
Mhm.
in really cool ways. So what would you say reservists offer employers?
Well, I'll tell you what. So
Because that's a burden now. 1/12 of their
absolutely.
time is
Yeah.
like as an entrepreneur.
Well, let me.
Do you hire reservists?
Oh, you better believe it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's my
But
hopes.
let me reframe it too. So
Yeah.
the weekend a month and 2 weeks a year. Again, unless you guys are working weekends, he's not really gone 30 days. I mean, he's gone for 2 weeks.
Well,
That's the
he has to
annual
like
training.
pack his bags on a Friday,
Okay,
and he's
all
got to
right,
like,
okay.
like he's got to take a nap on Mondays.
Right.
No, I'm totally joking.
Okay.
Okay.
So, but the thought that it's a 12th is probably a little high for the average. I mean, the minimum requirement is a weekend a month and 2 weeks a year. But I gave a talk at South by Southwest about this. I mean, long before I was even a flag officer, because I felt very passionate about veteran hiring. And the idea was, we have pretty lofty terms that we talk about our core values in the Navy. It's, honor, courage, and commitment. And in the Army, you may have heard, duty, honor, country. And you may hear those and go, yeah, okay, puffery words. I've heard them all before. My comment to you is they mean something, and they mean something to everyone who wears the uniform. So not only is there an appreciation for some of the soft skills, they're going to have good hygiene and show up on time and be responsible and accountable. And, what I learned by hiring a bunch of folks who were younger people straight out of college or second jobs out of college was developing culture is very hard. We take it for granted in the military because it's baked into what we do. Replicating that is really hard. When you hire veterans, they know that too, and they're the ones that are going to make it happen.
Oh, that's a cool, right?
They're the ones
and
that
culture
are gonna
eats
bring
strategy for lunch.
Absolutely.
Right. If you follow that insight,
Yeah.
like that's a cool statement alone. Yeah. I think you could almost stop there. I don't know if you're going to, but I think you could almost stop there in my mind. Yeah. It's like the first time I read this one research article that said those that practice mindfulness have an increased frequency in flow state, which is the most optimal state we can be.
Yeah.
I'm not going to stop there, but it's like one of those moments where it's like, whoa, can that be replicated? If so, like that's a significant finding. So what I just heard you say is those that come from cultures or organizations that value culture, you're going to get somebody in your organization that understands the value of culture.
As I say, do you want to be a consumer of culture or a creator of culture?
Oh, how about it?
Yeah. So those folks are going to come in and say, hey, I couldn't help but notice we never do ball games together. Why don't we get together once a month and do something outside?
What's a consumer?
Yeah. Consumers like, hey, I'm sitting here. We never do anything fun. Man. Hey, are you a baby bird waiting for stuff to fall in your mouth?
Oh my God.
Or are you going to be someone, I always say, create the culture you want to be a part of.
We can't have baby birds. We can't have, it's so
That's
good.
right.
Oh my God. All right. So if there was an equally weighted fast follow on creators of culture, what would be a second fast follow for why hire a reservist?
Look, education, training, certification. The Navy is a very technical service. I mean, in all likelihood, whether you're talking officer and enlisted, you're going to get someone with some pretty incredible competency that walks in the door. So, you are looking for something specific. This is an example where I would say I hire based on potential, not on experience.
That's what we
entirely.
Do as well.
Yeah. And that's one of those things where I would say you have demonstrated teamwork. You've been part of either a mission or a unit that has a function. Where did you fit in? What was your role? And what does that look like as you need it? I mean, there's a million ways that I think you benefit. And some of it is just soft skills. Again, accountability and responsibility. It's hard to teach that to young kids. It's easy if someone walks in the door saying, I was a platoon sergeant and I was responsible for folks on missions in Afghanistan. Now, not everyone's going to be, a Bronze Star wearing war hero, but even in peacetime, the responsibilities for safety and training are pretty onerous. So anyway, those things translate, I think.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Now, if we kind of fold back around before we get to family is command and control, this idea of like top-down leadership. I don't want to build an organization that way. And that is the organizations that you all have found to be significant in for all the reasons that the military and the Navy is what it is. Can you help me think about if we could wave a wand and we're a team of, let's say, a couple hundred to a couple thousand, could you imagine a different way of doing it? Or does this seem like, listen, I've been swimming in this water for so long, I know the assets and the power of top down, and I don't even want to entertain another way.
Well, first I would say the military has what we call Napoleonic organization codes. So, N for Navy, N1 is manpower and personnel, N2 is intelligence, 3 is operations, 4 is logistics, 5 is plans, et cetera. 6 communication, 7 is training. So, and they're called Napoleonic codes because he came up with it. So we're a couple hundred years in run on this stuff. And are we ready for evaluation? I think so. I mean, part of this is the way we really operate today is we have Napoleonic codes for administrative functions, but then we have matrix organizations for operational functions. Because you need to know, if I need new yellow stickies, who do I go to? You need a supply officer that's going to handle that for you. That's different than launch the Alert 5 strike. So anyway, we see differences in the way we're organized. In many cases, we're dealing with joint task forces, which are multi-service and multi-nation. So it's not enough for us to roll in and go, hey, here's how the U.S. Navy operates, because the Italians and the French and the Germans and the Brits are going to say, we do it differently. So we all take a little bit from one another, particularly in NATO and joint environments too. Back to your real question, I've always looked at how many direct reports am I comfortable with? And so I as a civilian C-suite executive, say, I want as flat an organization as I can possibly manage. I couldn't do it with a couple thousand, but I would certainly say I want to have no more than 10, just because I don't feel that I could really give the attention to those 10 and the functions that I'm assigning to them that I want to be really engaged with.
Do you feel like a teammate across those 10?
Absolutely.
Or do you feel like you do?
Yeah.
It's not like you're my team and like I'm part of your team. I just have a different job. I have a different responsibility.
I feel that way. I'm sure my staff would say, yeah, but he's not.
Right.
I mean, I want to be involved. I also recognize the need for my folks for them to spread their wings. If I'm there, even when I say, okay, we're all, park and rank at the door. This is a working session. Roll your sleeves up. I just know if I'm in the room that everyone defers to me, and I don't want them to necessarily. So sometimes the best I can do is, back to your question about style, we refer to something called mission command, which is a decentralized approach where we say, here's the mission we're trying to accomplish. If everybody's good with that, I'll get out of the way and you all figure it out. And then tell me what you need from me to help. Meaning, I'm not going to give you an instruction manual for every decision you're going to make. I trust you and you're responsible for it. We all agree that we are laddering up to this mission and you each have a role and function. And I'm standing by to support. Next time you come back to me, tell me either what you need or that you're done.
I love that.
Yeah.
It fits so much more in an entrepreneurial approach for me than, And I
mean, it's the antithesis of micromanagement. And again, it is predicated on a couple of things. One is absolute trust. You have to be confident. I have to be, as a leader, confident that my people understand when we say the mission, do we all have a shared understanding of what it is we're trying to accomplish? Two, do I have the trust that they can do it? Are they equipped? Are they capable? Are they trained? Is it possible for them to do what I'm asking of them? They may say, I got it, boss, I'm good, which may be false bravado if I go, really, how are you going to do that? You don't even have any of the equipment you need. So the trust piece is important. And then the other thing that I like to do is take my subordinate commanders together frequently to have conversations almost like this off the record where, I have a monthly session with we call them Echelon 3 commanders, where we have an hour, just us, no one else on the line, where we talk about, hey, what's going on in your life? What's happening? What's making your head hurt? What can I help you with? Anything I should know? And it's really for me to say, you guys haven't heard this yet, but this is coming down the pipe. I'm about to announce this new policy or something else that's going to impact you all. Or if, hey, the three of us or the three of you talked about this and gave me a recommendation, I appreciate your input, but we're doing something different. I want you to know why. Because that, this originated with Horatio Nelson, Lord Nelson of the British Navy, so that his commanders could operate in his absence. I said, if we talk enough, then you know where my head is, and
Is this where commander's intent came from?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Is your intent clear for your direct reports?
I sure hope so, and I try very hard to make sure it is.
How do you get to clarity?
So we have a number of mechanisms where we release executive orders. They call it XORD. I've put out a number of directives that say, here's what we're doing. Here's what we need to be ready to do by 2025. Here's what we have to be ready to do by 2027. I published a document called Battle Orders 2032, which is assuming we do everything in the fighting instructions that I published, here's what the world will look like when it's all done.
Whoa.
And the reason I did that was I got feedback. We had 130
Wow.
tasks that we were attacking with vigor, and folks said, I get the change. I just don't see how they all tie together.
Oh,
And I
very
said,
cool.
okay, so I'm going to write this separate document that says, here's the glimpse of the future that's in my head when we're doing all this stuff.
So commander's intent for me, I think about leader's intent, obviously not commander's intent in the civilian world, but it feels like what you just outlined is here's the mission or here's the objectives that we're going after. I think there's another component that gets confusing for me, which is how to operate when things break down.
Yeah.
So that type of intent on decision making, choice making, what is in and what is out for being able to accomplish it when the system goes sideways, we're in the messy middle. How do you get clarity on that? Because now you're outside of an SOP, a standard operating procedure. You're in the unfolding unknown.
Yeah.
So how do you get intent
there's
there?
so many potential variables that I could attack in the answer. But what I would say is, depending on the severity of the decision point, there are many things where I would say you are authorized to make these decisions. In some cases, the way we work it is you can say yes to everything, but only I can say no. So imagine if a 4-star admiral comes to the reserve force and says, I need something. I don't want one of my lieutenant commanders to say, no, Admiral,
Right.
So I say, you want to say yes? No problem. I reserve the right to say no. That's one example. But if you're describing something that is operational mission and things are going sideways, that's a different story. In some cases, we're not subject to debate. We're kind of taking direction from the leader, and we'll talk about it when the mission's over. But right now, you need to move. This isn't a good time for us to have a conversation about why.
So you get through. You write. That's a forcing function for you to become clear and translate those ideas. Writing is one of those.
Right.
And then how do you get clarity? Like yourself.
So, I have the benefit of just drinking from a fire hose of policy documents and future state discussions. And, we're doing a force design review for the Navy of 2045. And, as we're reading all this stuff, my reaction, of course, is what's the reserve inject on this? And what do I need to be thinking today so that by 2045, we are ready to deliver what's being committed to?
Why 2045? It's even mind-blowing. I don't think in those terms, which is really cool.
Well, it's interesting. We do a 30-year shipbuilding plan, and that's because one, like aircraft carriers, it takes between 5 and 6 years to build one. So you need to commit early.
How long does it take China to build one?
Well, they're building their third. It will probably take them about 5, so they bought one from Russia, and then they built one that was a copy of that. So the first 2 are, kind of B- craft. The third one they're building is equivalent to our Nimitz class. So that's a legit carrier, but it's still going to be a couple of years.
Okay. But in general, they can produce faster than we can.
Well, they've got more yards, so their capacity is greater. At some point, this is one of those things where I'd say, you can't put 9 ladies in a room and make a baby in 1 month. So even if, sorry. So they have more shipyards, so they can build more ships simultaneously. It doesn't mean that they can build one ship faster.
I see.
Yeah.
I see how that works. Okay. It's still an important variable.
Yeah.
That capacity.
Yeah. Capacity.
Okay.
Definitely.
So family.
Ah, yes.
The Mustin family, like we hinted on the legacy, the generational legacy that you have. When you were growing up, and maybe even now, do you feel that there's a shadow or a spotlight that creates attention for you? Or is this the handoff that they've given to you is like, I'm running faster than I ever could on my own, and it's more generative in that way?
I always thought, first, as a young man, I was really fortunate that my grandfather, who was a career naval officer, Naval Academy graduate, was still alive through my early entry into the Navy. So my high school,
World War
college, he was a World War II veteran, yeah. And his stories were legendary. So part of what I remember was, sitting around the table at Thanksgiving or cocktail parties, and his friends would come to these parties, and I was just a very eager listener when they were recounting these stories of heroism in World War II and the Pacific. And Granddad was telling the story of, his ship in a night battle that sunk. And, General Condon, who was the guy that taught me how to play golf, who, was a running mate of a guy named Pappy Bowington. I don't know if you ever saw Baba Black Sheep, but legendary Marine aviator. And so these folks were talking about what they did. And I just always thought I would be honored to be a part of that kind of conversation. And then when I would talk to my friends or be at my friends' families, and I didn't see conversations like that, And so then I would notice my father and his friends who were Vietnam and Cold War era folks, same kind of stories. There we were in the Kola Peninsula looking down the throat of the Russians, and I thought, this is some pretty heady real world stuff. And it's and I'm just fortunate to be privy to this. I mean, one time when I was a midshipman at the Naval Academy, and this is a funny story, that the house I live in now is the house that my parents lived in. And so it's quarters at the Washington Navy Yard, but it's the same quarters that I lived in when I was a midshipman. But I came home unannounced one time, and I walked in, basically opened up the door. I was like, hey, Mom, Dad, I'm home. And I look in the living room, and my father is there in uniform, standing with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and two folks with a big chart on our living room sofa, pointing to something. And I walked in, I was like, am I interrupting? As they kind of drop a curtain over the chart, And I said, I'll get out of here right now. Mm-hmm. But so I saw this and on one hand kind of took it for granted. And I thought, hey, this is neat. Our parents, our grandparents, parents, uncle, great grandparents, we serve. And that's what we do.
But it's at the high, you're being humble. It's at the highest level. I mean, it's a family of vice admirals.
Right.
Admirals.
Well, so they were career officers. And so I remember.
But at the highest level.
Well, I mean, they were fortunate to continue to serve. I mean, they had some great jobs.
Great grandfather was his tag.
He passed away as a captain. Yeah. So he was the one, they called him the father of naval aviation. So
is this a spotlight or is this a shadow
I mean, I was always very proud.
Yeah. So you never felt, so it's not shadow. You weren't operating the shadows of legends.
Well,
of tall trees.
I don't typically volunteer this. I mean, my sense was, because of that, I don't know what everyone thinks, but my assumption is they're going to think this guy thinks he's got an in, or he's not going to have to work as hard. I went to the Naval Academy, and as a plebe, as soon as people found out, oh, wait a minute, your dad's an admiral? Okay, it's not good to be a plebe at the Naval Academy when your father's an admiral, because everyone says.
What is plebe?
Freshman.
Okay.
Freshman. And so my view was always, you know what? I'm going to try that much harder, and I'm just going to be the best. And then there won't be any discussion. So no one will have to worry about, okay, did someone cut him slack or not? My view was, let's just make it so apparent that, hey, I was selected based on performance.
He gets after it.
Right.
End of sentence.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay. And you didn't feel the heat from that spotlight. Like, I have to be great because of the legacy.
I may have felt some of that. I mean, let's put it this way. I want to earn it. And I want to set a good example for my kids.
Yeah. So that's what you did, is like you took back your control by saying, what can I do here? I can apply myself to my fullest.
Right.
And now I'm guiding the way I experience me being me in this world of people that I don't care how they're thinking about me as much as I care about how I'm applying myself.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's the clarity I was looking for.
And honestly, I think there's going to be a time when I'm dead and buried. And I would love for people to speak of me the same way they speak of my father and grandfather.
Oh, that's cool. What do you hope they say?
Made a difference. I say, like, the greatest legacy we're going to leave is our children and the people that we trained. I'll have 20 years of officers and sailors that have been part of my staffs and commands that will be doing great things way after I'm gone. And if they continue to do great things, then that's probably the best reflection of my contribution.
Vice Admiral John Mustin, thank you so much for an absolute masterclass in leadership and thoughtfulness and clarity of idea and thinking about how to do it at scale. So thank you for coming through to the Mastery Lab today.
It's my honor, and I'm so excited to have met you. And actually, as I said, for having been a years-long listener, thrilled to be a part of this. Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.